Hello and welcome to another modelling video. This is Alan from the McConaughey at YouTube with another Q&A session. Last week I asked you all to submit questions in the video stating ask your modelling questions here, and today I'll be reading them through, fulfilling your requests and answering whatever comes through. If you wish to contribute to this segment in future, the next time that video appears up, make sure to have a quick look into it and add something to the comment section or anywhere else on my social media presence that has to do with this segment. Before we jump into it, I have a vlog coming up very shortly on some massive changes and big news for the channel and my modelling. So stay tuned for that. That will be coming out at some point. Besides that, things are going well and we're applying everything as per schedule. To those who leave comments and left questions, thank you very much. It adds to the content of this show. We've got Desert83. Apologies if I pronounce anyone's handles incorrectly or not at all. Photo etch parts for Gunpla. Maha09 etch parts by Samuel Deckles. Shout out to Samuel. How does one paint the metal in this case, assuming it should even be done at all? There have been photo etch for modelling for a very long time, and we're all familiar how the aircraft military people do it. It is a newish thing for Gunpla. It's been around for a while, but it's suddenly become very popular with a vast amount of aftermarket stuff coming out of Asia and being sold all over the place. I've bought some from a number of companies and small firms. A tutorial on it is around the corner. I hope to make it and release it sometime this year, early next year. So it's a subject that I'm going to touch on. And with all the interesting shapes, some of it is tickling my fancy to the point where I would like to use it on some of my subjects. So it's something that interests me. Now, what traditionally is used for military models, you have things like tanks, aircraft, whatnot. It's detail that's chemically etched or cut through the use of acid on very thin strips of copper and other metals by applying masks over it. So you could create things like rivets and writing and panels and vents that are quite tiny, little hinges and whatnot. And you glue them to your tanks or control instrument panels on aircraft that cannot quite be picked up in resin casting or styrene, or if it does, when you're sanding it, it's removed. It's a good way to add detail later on. Traditionally, they have been absurdly expensive, and they're definitely most favoured and featured in aircraft with railing and antennas and whatnot. The protocol is to glue them onto a surface when it's still in its raw plastic state, prime it and paint it. The most popular way of attaching it is either super glue or PVA glue. Unfortunately, with super glue, it has a tendency of, if you make a mistake, scarring the plastic and requiring cleanup or sanding, or even flooding the detail of the etch. The use of PVA glue is preferred as you can move around the parts and wait for it to dry. However, the adhesion is a lot weaker, so you've got your advantages, disadvantages. Some of the Gundam stuff, like your metal thrusters and extra add-ons, are all sorts of different metals, and they look quite interesting. Some of them are stick back, so you just peel and apply them straight to the surface. It's quite interesting. Traditionally, you always paint your etch with the colour of your kit, but the rules of Gundam and Gunpla is completely different. If it looks suitable and appropriate, unpainted, it's perfectly fine. Leave it if it belongs that way to the finish of your model and you like it that way. To paint it, I was recently taught a new method that when you cut your photo etch out, you apply it to some tongs or pliers, get a lighter out and you burn the surface a bit. It roughs it up so it etches to the paint a lot easier. Metal's quite smooth and paint doesn't etch as easily. If you use a etch primer, that is already able to attach itself to metal, so that's not a problem. If you don't, have a look at my Mr. Metal Primer video, and that will show you how to deal with photo etch parts. You paint over it. So if you're painting it, just make sure it's primed by lighting it up with a bit of fire, or using Mr. Metal Primer, which is a clear liquid, and you just hand paint it on. Again, the video covers that. You paint over it as appropriate, but almost guaranteed it's always attached to the model well before the painting stage. And again, very shortly, I will be covering photo etch for Gunpla and science fiction subjects on this channel. Thank you for the question. GJ Carr. Who are your favourite modelers? I haven't. That's a very, very good question. Being in the hobby and having an online presence for a very, very long time, I've had a chance to meet a lot of modelers and seen a lot of artwork by people who have a social media presence or who become quite famous through magazines, competitions, whatnot. The models that really stood out and just grabbed my attention immediately, and I still really like looking at their work in progress photos and their finished models, and who pretty active for a long time, or still active to this day, is DC23, or Don Stratos from the Philippines. He won the Gunpla Builders World Cup consecutively, and he builds these very rich environments and dioramas, and he overly details his mechs, where they've got all these mechanical components and raised detail, a lot like the surface of a Star Wars spacecraft or something. They're overly detailed, they look very, very interesting, they're quite neat, and they've just got very fascinating ways of picking out the detail, weathering, and the choice of colours. So I've always liked the stories that his modelling tells. And I remember when he jumped on the Bakuk forums after his first kit, which came out of nowhere, and posted this amazing piece as a first time modeller, and he kept going hard until he took a break, and he's into tattooing now and 2D art. So he will return to modelling at some point. I think at the moment he's playing with figures, wargaming stuff, Vallejo paint, but his work's absolutely amazing, and you will easily find his older stuff by googling DC23. A modeller who's very similar to his style would be Toymaker, and I like looking at a lot of his finished stuff. If you don't know who he is, it's very worthwhile googling and having a look. He is a world-class modeller, and his stuff is really, really amazing. Going to the UK, Cam, who was not modelling for a very, very long time. I really like how he modulates and just does the schemes of his work. His kits just really stand out to me, and he's quite a popular and celebrated modeller. He ran the Mecha Lounge for a period of time and did a lot of community building out in that direction. Loved his work. If we go to non-mecha models, Dr. Cranky, he pumps out a lot of work. His stuff is very unique, very different, very out there. He does cars, but he would weather them and modify them to the point where they become post-apocalyptic science fiction zombie hunters. And he would also do these very abstract schemes on all sorts of classic and different style of cars and whatnot. I don't follow him as often as I used to, but I do jump in and have a look at his finished kits. His book is very, very worthwhile buying and just getting a taste into his painting style. The introduction to him really opened my eyes, and I wanted to change my style to just stand out and be as unique as he is, but in a completely different direction. Very approachable, very friendly. He does have a YouTube channel. He pumps out videos at just a crazy rate. But just jumping in and looking at his most effective videos is worthwhile, and some of his tips on weathering, the use of pigments, the use of airbrush stencils is just really, really fun. Probably my last guy that I like each and every model of would be Harry Houdini. He's got a YouTube channel, runs a few Facebook groups, does a lot of older kits, aircraft, tanks, all that sort of stuff. He just punches out models at an amazing rate, hand paints them, and he sort of takes the more older fashioned approach to modelling. He's based out in Australia, and just the subjects he goes for and the way he finishes them and how effective he's become by just pumping out models and constantly practicing and constantly building is just absolutely fun. He's got a fun attitude, he's very helpful, and he's just out there having a good time and just punching out models. But his glue together and hand painted kits is just really out there. Love his aircraft as someone who's not that into aircraft. And then there's just a whole plethora of local modelers and models outside that do a lot of work. That's nice, but they just pump out that one or two models that are just really out there and grabs my attention. But so far it would probably be DC23, Dr. Cranky, Harry. Those guys just really, really step out for me. And Cam. Hey, how's it going? I really love your channel. Thank you very much. Quick question. This is Sand Oval. Have you used any of those clear coats that can be airbrushed, such as Mr. Hobby 46 Clear, rather than using old rattle can ones? All of my clear coats are exclusively airbrush of this time. I imagine they would look clearer since it would go on even. What are your thoughts and experience with them? Is there any tips or tricks to use them? Read more. Thanks. Fair enough. Airbrush clears are really the way to go. Now, for a long time, I much preferred using acrylic clears, even over enamels or lacquers. Lacquers have a tendency of drying very quickly. Generally, your lacquers have a tendency of clouding up. Now, the reason why it clouds up is it dries far too quick. It doesn't have a chance to allow the resins to harden correctly, and it just mucks up with the pigment density. If you apply it with extra thinner to slow down the drying time and apply it far too heavily, you risk activating the paint underneath with that thinner, mixing with the clear as it's sitting there drying, and it becomes cloudy for that reason. Once you master dusting and applying it just right, it's pretty good. When you're new to airbrushing and you're doing things in very, very heavy coats, start off using acrylics as your top coat, your Tamiya, your Aquarius, Guns, that sort of stuff. You mix it with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, put a clear coat, and it will come out beautifully. It is very slow to dry, so I wouldn't touch or handle or mask the surface for about 1 to 2 days. Though that's the very best result you can get over rattle cans. Rattle cans suffer the same problem as they go on very, very thick, and if you put a clear coat far too thickly on another acrylic or lacquer surface, they can also fog up due to mixing with the paint beneath. This is where airbrush has beautiful control, and you can put any type of paint in it. So I would definitely look into the Aquarius or the Tamiya clear instead of the lacquer for now. If you have experience, just dust on that clear in 1 or 2 separate coats, and it works absolutely beautifully. Alex, I want to know if I can apply Bunzids from the brand Winsor & Newton in my model kits, or is there another Bunzids that I can use other than Vallejo or Tamiya? For those who don't know, and I actually had to Google it myself, it is a clear varnish. It's mostly associated with wood surfaces, and it's more like a wood polish or finish. It has a slight tint to it. Now, Winsor & Newton is a artist brand of paints and finishes. Generally, a paint is a paint. It applies to model kits, and if you use the right base, it doesn't affect other finishes unless you allow a sufficient amount of time to dry it and harden. Then it's pretty open what you can and can't use. It would be very, very safe to use the Winsor and Newton version on your model kits. I have been known to use unconventional stuff like floor polishes and even shellacs. So do a small sample test, get a small part or a runner, do the same airbrushing you would on a model kit, apply it, see how it reacts. If it's good, use it on your model by all means. I am not aware that Vallejo does something like that, though being a polyurethane, I would advise against it. To me, it definitely does not have anything like that in its catalogue unless you use one of its clear paints. I would say go for it, experiment, report back on your findings. Send me a picture of what it looks like. I'd be very keen to check it out. Roberto, hi. After placing the decals and covering them with clear paint to protect it, what is the process of sanding over the sticker so it looks painted on the model? How should it be done? When should it be done? Thanks. Some decals look very, very thick and the edges stand out. Ideally, you want to put a few coats of clear, and you want to make sure that clear paint dries and hardens to its absolute maximum maturity, so you're not moving it around and smudging it or damage the decal. Apply the clear, lacquer acrylic, give it 1 to 2 days to make sure it's fully hardened. Start with a 2000 grit sandpaper and just lightly wisp over it, and then go up to 3, 5, 7000 grits, or a combination you like, no higher than 10,000 grits, and rub it down. The finish will start looking less shiny. Do not cut into the decal or the paint. When you're in doubt, stop, apply a few more clear coats, allow it to dry, and go again until you're happy with how flat it is, depending on the thickness of the decal. That would be the process to go about it. The thicker the paint, the more you'll be able to sand. If you sand and polish far too much, then you damage lifting paint or going down to bare plastic where its detail is raised to its most highest form, or damaging the decal as there's the least amount of protection between the decal and the clear paint. The trick is letting it to dry. So to prevent being impatient, as you're slowly polishing, adding clear polishing, work on another project. Next question, John. How do you, we'll just open up the whole comment. How do you hand brush white and other light colours, yellow, on models using Vallejo model colour? I tried to hand brush them in my previous model, but it didn't work well compared to other colours, red, blue, green, grey, etc. Even after another layer, the white yellow doesn't seem to cover the underlying primer. To make matters worse, the paint just clumps up on the sides when I brush. I apply primer, by the way, grey primer, from hardware grey spray cans. Unfortunately, there's not a lot you can do. Vallejo is not the greatest product on the market, and it has a tendency of being very thin on pigment density. Pigment density is those little particles of pigment that build up and show the colour. The rest of it is, of the formula of the paint, is something to encapsulate the pigment, the binder, normally a resin, and the vehicle, your thinners and setting agents and whatnot. So what stays behind is the bond and the pigment. Vallejo and other hobby brands are notorious for having low pigment counts, so you can do shading, pre-shading, all that sort of stuff, and show what's happening below. If you want a surface to be white or mostly white, your best bet is to rattle can it or airbrush it in a white primer or a white paint. If you use a lacquer white, you can treat that as a very, very thin primer. Then when you're painting light colours like yellow or whatnot, that works out well. If you do not have that as a choice, paints are translucent. They reflect light what's on the bottom. It's reflecting light off the primer. That's absorbing light. It gives it that off-white murky colour. use something that reflects white and naturally looks whitish if you put white over it. Rattle can silver or hand paint silver over the primer. Allow that sufficient time to dry. Thin down your Vallejo white or another acrylic white and do multiple coats. If you're willing to buy another product, the GSI Accretion white hand paints are beautiful, and that would only require 2 coats, and that would be an alternative if you're willing to jump on another product. If you have to use Vallejo, you need to use another undercoat, because there's nothing or no amount of coats that's going to cover that grey primer. So it's all about the base coating. And when you read your manuals and guides to figure painting and Warhammer painting and all that sort of stuff, they'll back that up by saying base coats are the colour that's most appropriate. If it's a lot of light colours, that base coat has to be white. I hope that answers your question, John. Next, Dan's, Vans, Dilemmas, Lands, Modelbench. That's quite a name, mate. G'day. I just started my first serious attempt at building a car kit and have some trouble getting a nice finish on the body of the car. My question is, when doing a model with a gloss finish like a car, how do you go about wet sanding and getting the best finish? Also, give a shout out to my own model channel, and there's a link. Keep up the great work. Keep up the great work on the channel, and thank you for contributing to the community. Thank you very much, Dan. I will put a link to your channel down below if you're interested in car modelling and whatnot. Check out Dan's channel. I haven't had a look yet, so I'll have a look tonight, and if I really like it, I'll chuck a link on Facebook as well. Now, the trick to car modelling, I'm not a car modeller, but I've seen enough model cars and the processes and talked to enough of them to have a bit of an idea. I've replicated the effect on Gunpla before. It's all about surface preparation and sanding. Once you've got your bare plastic, you lay down a primer, and primer has a tendency of being bumpy to grip and attach paint. Lacquers are your best friend when spraying cars. Put down your primer, you get 2000 to a high grit of sandpaper, and you polish that primer so it's as smooth as a plastic spoon. Apply your paint and apply it as thinly, as nice as possible. Airbrush is preferably, rattle can second. Allow that sufficient amount of time to dry and harden, 1 to 2 days. Give that a polish. 2000 grit, work your way up to 7,000-8,000 grit sandpaper to get that nice polished look. Then it's a series of your touch-ups, your washes, whatever. Dry, clear coat, decal, clear coat, polish, clear coat, polish. Once you've polished your final clear coat, it's all nice and glossy. Then you get the buffing compounds onto it, and it's going to be as shiny as the real thing. It's playing the long game. It's a really, really long process, but the more time you spend on it, the more rewarding. The first few times you do a car and you try to achieve this finish, it's going to be really time consuming. It could take you a year to make 1 or 2 kits. The more often you practice painting, drying, polish cut with the sandpaper and the polishing compounds, the quicker you'll get out of it, and you'll be punching out kits at no time at various stages of completion. I have a video on my channel, sanding with high grit, or polishing with high grit sandpaper, as well as polishing compound by Guns. Find those 2 tutorials, or I'll put them in the description section if I remember to do so. Send me a message to remind me if I fail to do so in the comment section. I'll hand over those 2 tutorials. They will help you out in far more information than I can give you right now. But the finish is not hard to achieve whatsoever. Anyone can do it. It's just knowing the process, knowing how paint behaves after you apply it, and being patient and putting in the time, as well as buying really, really fine sandpaper, which you can do on eBay or other places, because normally 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,000 grit sandpaper is not readily available in auto stores or art shops or anything like that. They are definitely sold easily and very cheaply on the internet. They may seem expensive for small quantities, but they, especially the stuff from Germany, they do not wear out. You can use the same piece of sandpaper for dozens and dozens of models until that paper starts to deteriorate. It's almost more like a cloth. So have a look into that. Have a look at the polishing compounds. Probably practice. Get a hood or a bonnet off a car kit that you don't want or care about or ruins, and just focus on polishing and painting that one part before you apply on the kits or on a kit that you don't care too much about. I hope this helps you, Dan. And a reminder, check out Dan's channel. And thank you very much for making videos as well. I look forward to looking at it, and thank you for your question. The clerk says, can you give examples of sanding and filling resin kits? I chipped some parts even when cutting the model with a hobby knife. We've got two types of resin. If you're buying an older kit, they've matured for a long time. They're either polystone or a porcelain ceramic-y based resin. They have a tendency to be very hard, though they're somewhat got flex to it. You can cut them with a hobby blade and you just slice them ever so carefully, though due to the nature of the material you can gorge very, very easily. Today's resin that's coming out of Asia, it's white in colour, very starch white instead of a tan fleshy colour. They are very, very soft yet still quite strong, and they're not brittle at all. They've got plenty of flex to them. They're soft to the point where they're very easy to machine, sand, cut, and they slice as smooth as butter. So just take care and make sure that the tools that you're using is very, very sharp. With our putty, the best putty that reacts to a washed resin surface is polyester. You can buy large quantities of polyester and sometimes 1 part polyester putty from automotive shops. They have a very strong smell, so it's best to use them in a ventilated area. Tamiya and Mori Mori also do a 2-part that you mix and apply. And the reason why this putty is really good is it's virtually resin based itself. So you're fusing resin onto resin. It's just as soft, and it sands, cuts and polishes off just as smoothly. Some of my resin videos, my later ones, has examples of me using polyesters and all sorts of stuff, particularly the figures. That would give you an example of how I approached it and not have leftover gorge marks or pinholes or whatnot. Sometime in the future I will do filling seam lines and removing imperfections and working on resin. I just like to have my resin game a little higher before I start making tutorials for everyone to follow, and that's catalogued on Google. But for now, your best bet is going through polyester putty. Hope that helps you out, mate. Christopher Potter. How do you make asphalt roads? This is for dioramas. If you have a look at your bitumen or asphalt roads in real life, they're textured, very, very lumpy. Asphalt, I would collect dust, debris, dirt, and I'll sieve it to the point where I've got a collection of dust or sand at the course that is suitable to the scale. Where I would have my path or road on the model, I would bump it out a bit with some sort of putty or edge iron clay or something, and put in some tracks for road wheels and whatnot. Lay down some PVA or wood glue, sprinkle it on, allow it to dry. If you want it to look like it's sealed asphalt, you put multiple layers of PVA to look like it's sealed, and you paint it. If you want it to look loose, water down some PVA, put it across, allow that to dry, prime, paint. Sealed asphalt, like bitumen, you paint it black, put some of those white lines and whatnot. If it's looking like a natural gravel, use a series of dry brushing, and then pick out individual rocks with different shades of either earth or black and white or greys or colours depending on the look you're going for. Get some photos of the sort of road that you want to produce, have it next to your work and have a look and try to replicate it visually as best as you can, opposed to memory, because your memory can do some funny things and it just pops out of not being absolutely realistic. So that would be the best way at having a go at it. If you're not good at collecting dust or sieving that sort of stuff, go to a railway shop, diorama shop, model railway places are the best. Have a look at their collection of flock and different grades of sands and rocks and whatnot. And sometimes they would actually have an asphalt collection and coloured material that you can use straight out of the packet, as it's very similar to the ballast they use under railroads tracks. So there are all some possibilities you can easily explore. Thank you very much for the question. Lon242, long time contributor. Thank you for the question. We've got 3 questions here. I've had clear plastic of a plain canopy go cloudy on me after displaying it for a few months. The canopy had nub areas that needed to be sanded. So I did need to wet sand the entire piece with high 2000 grit sandpaper. What can I do to prevent this from happening? I remember you said a good clear polishing could help. Novice plastic polish, right? Novus plastic polish, right? I don't know what Novus is. Would be good if I sealed it with gloss. What I would do is, if it's clouded up a bit, I would hit it with 2000 grit sandpaper and then polish it further with some higher grit stuff. If that's not good enough, polishing compounds, either Tamiya or this Novus polish, plastic polish would work if you have access to that. When it's all nice and clean, give it a rinse under water, sufficiently dry it, and dip it in a Future Pledge floor polish, or give it a coat of clear gloss. And the clear gloss should prevent it from fogging. If it does fog, it's because the finish has fogged, and you can easily strip that in bleach and reapply a new finish. But generally, my new approach to working with clear parts, especially canopies, once you've removed the nub and you polished it up, clear coat it, then do your hand painting and further work. The beautiful thing is if you muck up the masking or the hand painting, or you fog it up or something, you've fogged up the clear coat, not the part. So you soak in bleach, pull it out, re-clear coat in gloss, repaint it up. Only use wood glue and PVA glue when applying it to the model. And that would be your ultimate guide to dealing with clear parts. Question 2. In general, do you find it necessary to gloss clear parts, such as car windows and plain canopies? Yes. Before you do anything, when you cut out of the runner and you remove the nub, clear it immediately. Even better, clear it while it's on the runner, remove the nub, and then just hand paint some clear where the nub used to be. That way, if you fog anything up, you damage anything, you're damaging the clear coat. Aside from Future, are there any other gloss coat products you like to use? Tamiya, lacquer if you know what you're doing and you're adding retardant to it. Any hobby clear really that's not water or polyurethane based. Thank you very much, Lon, for those questions. That was really done. Lucky last, this is an anonymous one, though I'm going to be giving him a shout out as well. Hey man, been following your channel for a while and saw your Q&A video and shout outs. We're from Canada and wanting to get the word out for Gunpla in the Toronto region. Shout out to the Canadian and Toronto Gunpla community. There's quite a few modelers out there, some of them pretty good. Club name is Gunpla Toronto Association. Also, I have a retail store dedicated to Gundams and Bandai models. It'd be great if you can give a shout out to our store as well for your Canadian viewers. pandahobby.store. Hope to talk to you soon for future opportunities. So any of my viewers out there, if you're a Canadian modeler, a Canadian Gunpla modeler. There is a club in Toronto. If they have any sort of social media outlets or whatnot, have a look at their store page. Have a look at whenever they're doing meets and association stuff. Even if you're not living in Toronto, you're visiting, check them out, throw them some support. It's always great when a hobby club forms, because once you have one forming in a centralized area, it starts to disperse and smaller groups appear and prop up all over the place and network, much like an IPMS chapter. So if you have any opportunity to give these guys support, a visit, handouts, check out their events, hang out with them, go to a competition with them, definitely do so. The experience is very rewarding. It's a lot of fun, and generally these things just cater to every level and every interest of modeler. If you're a beginner or getting into it, to someone who's well established, there's something to give and there's always something to receive. So check these guys out. If you're looking to shop, these guys are definitely retail outlets, and it's just a really good opportunity. All of that done, said, and whatnot. Thank you very much for the questions, everyone. Thank you very much for watching. We will get back to you with that vlog as promised at the start of the video, and I'll continually upload content once to twice a week, as well as stuff on Facebook as well. Catch you guys next time, and definitely drop a line for the next Q&A session. Catch you guys next time.